What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. And today, the weather's getting warmer. Summer Games Fest is in just a few weeks, and you know what that means? A Nintendo Direct is soon to follow, or is to precede it. That's the new rumor on the street. Regardless, we are going to get a Nintendo Direct soon, and perhaps as soon as a week from now, so I thought it would be a good time to come on and talk about what we could see at this June presentation for Nintendo. Obviously, nothing is confirmed yet, although who knows, it could be any moment at this point if the Direct is indeed just a week or so away. But I think this could be a really fun Direct with a lot of big announcements for Nintendo. So with how hectic these next few weeks are going to be in terms of Nintendo discussion, and with how much I think could be covered at this Nintendo Direct, I decided to try and get out ahead of this, and I think now is as good a time as ever to discuss what we could see in a potential June Nintendo Direct. Alright, so at the time I'm recording this, the rumor we have to go off of is from the great PH Brazil, who apparently said on his show, we're going to get a Direct either the launch week of the Switch 2 or the week after. Now, him talking about the potential of a Direct on the Switch 2 launch week is interesting because that would kind of be unprecedented, right? I would imagine that Nintendo wants the sole focus during launch week to be on the Switch 2 and on people excited to get it in their hands on June 5th. But potentially, they want to get out in front of it and give a big Direct a few days before they launch a new console. Now, in terms of dates, it would almost have to be the 3rd or the 4th, right, before the Switch 2 launch, because Nintendo always likes to announce a Direct a day in advance, so they can't have it on the Monday before. It would have to be on the Tuesday or the Wednesday before. I can't imagine any world where they have a Direct on the release date of the Switch 2, and then the day after. They don't usually have Directs on Friday because I believe Friday for us is Saturday for Japan. So there's a very small window of opportunity for us to get that Direct if it is indeed happening on the Switch 2's launch week. Now, why might Nintendo want to have a Direct on the launch week of the Switch 2? Well, I have a few ideas here. One, I think it just simply builds more hype and FOMO. Right? Obviously, people are excited for this console, but there are a lot of people who, whether because of financial reasons or lack of interest or lack of being able to get the console, are not going to be participating in the launch week and getting their console and celebrating a new Nintendo generation. But perhaps if they see a few big reveals in this Direct, that might change their mind, assuming they would have access to it at a GameStop nearby, who I think are going to have extra consoles on day one. But also, it's this idea for Nintendo that all boats, what's the saying? High tide raises all boats. Something like that. Doesn't really matter. The point is that an event like a Nintendo Direct generates a lot of hype for the Nintendo brand. Someone might see a few big Switch 2 announcements and say, okay, I'm going to pick up a Switch 2, and they eventually get one. They say, okay, I'm really interested in that game that comes out in October, but I'm going to buy Mario Kart World, I'm going to pre-order DK Bonanza, and what the heck, I'll buy the stupid day one tutorial crap that they're charging for as well. One might think that a Direct right before the Switch 2's launch would distract from the new console and complicate things, and I think there is credence to that, but I think it could also help the console succeed and generate even more hype and FOMO for it. So I think that could make sense. Also, it's just another chance to get a look at those launch games. For Nintendo to remind everybody, these are the games we are releasing on June 5th. I think the third parties especially would appreciate a little boost like that. And then the third reason I have is that perhaps they have to reveal games for third parties before Summer Games Fest. We know these contracts for Nintendo Directs are decided months, if not years, before we actually see the games themselves in these presentations sometimes, and perhaps Nintendo agreed to have reveals for certain games, be it a Resident Evil or a Dragon Quest XII, before Summer Games Fest, where they are then going to be shown off again, whether it be on opening night, some sort of, play event they have throughout the week, or in a Sony State of Play. If Nintendo has agreements like this for big third-party games that are being announced alongside the Switch 2, surely they want to have a Direct before Summer Games Fest to reveal them, and in fact, they might be contractually obligated to. And at that point, you could just do a partner showcase and then a main Direct later, but why not put the two together and just simplify things? In terms of why they might rather have it the week after launch, though, like I said, it could definitely distract from the launch of the Switch 2, especially if there's a shadow drop of some kind. A lot of people are going to have on their bingo cards for this Direct Prime 2 and 3 Remastered shadow drop, and I think that's very possible. But that might distract, if it happens a day or two before the Switch 2's launch, it might distract from the console. People might say, oh, I got Metroid Prime 2 and 3, I don't need to pick up a Switch 2, or at the very least, people are tweeting about Metroid Prime 2 and 3 and not tweeting about Mario Kart World, and the hype and the talk about that kind of gets pushed back a little because you just shadow drop this big game. If you do that a week after, I don't think that effect is as large, though obviously that's all conjecture. Doing a Direct the week after the launch of the system would also allow you to dominate 2 news cycles, the week before Summer Games Fest and the week after. Whereas if you do a Direct before, all of the hype and all of the media attention for Nintendo is going to be essentially Monday through Thursday. If they announce this Direct on Monday before the Switch 2's launch and have it on Tuesday or Wednesday, and then they launch the console on Thursday, people are going to be talking about Nintendo for the entire week. But then Xbox is going to have a presentation, Summer Games Fest is going to happen, PlayStation won't be far behind, and maybe Nintendo won't be able to dominate and control the headlines as much as they would like to. Whereas if they have a Direct the week after, they're dominating the media cycle the week of the launch, of course, because they're launching a new console, but then they get renewed interest with a Direct that has a bunch of new Switch 2 announcements, maybe some Switch 1 games as well. So it would allow Nintendo to get more consistent and even coverage in these crucial first 2 weeks for the Switch 2. And then finally, I think third parties who are launching on the Switch 2 wouldn't be very happy if Nintendo has some big announcements that they make right before those games go live on the new system, especially if Nintendo has some big third-party announcements like a Red Dead Redemption 2 port or a GTA 4 port, or, well, like I mentioned earlier, big new games like RE0 Remake or Dragon Quest IX or Final Fantasy IX. If you're Cyberpunk 2077 or Fast Fusion or something like that, I think you'd be mad if you're one of those publishers and Nintendo announces a bunch of big third-party games coming to the system that you're releasing a game on in just a few days. I don't know how much that would affect sales, especially because a lot of people are probably pre-ordering these games well ahead of time. But I think if you have a Direct a few days before the Switch 2's launch, that would lower the amount of people who panic buy and feel pressured into getting a game like Cyberpunk 2077 on the eShop day one or something. If they know that in a few months Resident Evil 0 is coming to the system, they might want to save their money. Whereas if they don't know that until the week after, I've already bought Cyberpunk 2077 and now I'll go buy Resident Evil or pre-order that game too. So I think the launch titles in general would get overshadowed a little bit, but look, nothing's overshadowing Mario Kart World. That game's gonna do just fine no matter what. But other third parties that are launching that day probably wouldn't be the happiest if there's a Direct just a few days before. So I wonder if Nintendo would try to appease them and not announce any big new games until after those games launch on the new system. Gun to my head, I think it makes more sense to have a Direct the week after launch. Just feels like a lot for 1 week if you're going to have a big Direct. Like, this is going to be a meaty Nintendo Direct, we assume. If you're going to have that and then 2 days later launch a new console, that feels like a lot to cover, a lot to talk about. Just feels like something's going to cannibalize something, and it probably makes more sense for Nintendo if they have the Direct a week after launch. But we'll see. So enough of these logistics. That's boring. Let's get into the games we could see from Nintendo. There's 3 categories I have. Games that have already been announced that need dates, games that haven't been announced, potential new announcements for Nintendo, and then potential third parties we could see at this Direct. I already did a whole video talking about when I think Nintendo's 2025 games are going to release, and also whether there's going to be a big holiday game for Nintendo in October. So if you want to check out that video, you can do so. It's on my channel. I'll link it in the description, and it'll also be at the end of the video. Dragon Drive has a summer 2025 window. We need a date for that. Kirby Air Riders, just 2025. Same thing with Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Metroid Prime 4, also just 2025. And then 2 games we do need dates for, but might not see at this Direct necessarily. Pokemon Legends ZA, late 2025 release date. Pokemon could do that themselves, whether it be before or after this Direct. And then the Duskbloods, which could be a September Direct thing. It could even be a February Direct thing next year if this game is a little bit further off than we think. But I'm not sure we see it at this Direct regardless. All right, we ran through that, but those are the games that we need release dates for. Again, I talk about this more in depth in the video I made a few days ago, and at the end of this video, when I give my predictions, I'll tell you when I think those games are releasing again. I will reiterate it. In terms of first-party games we could see, not games we will see, these aren't my predictions, but these are games I think are possible to see in this June Direct. I just want to mention two things that PH Brazil brought up in terms of games we could see theoretically at this Direct. He teased a while back that this year Nintendo was going to reveal and release a new entry in a beloved franchise, and who knows what that could be. He reiterated that it was not Rhythm Heaven or Tomodachi Life, so this is something different than what we saw in that March Direct earlier this year. The two franchises I keep sticking to in terms of what this could be, Mother and Golden Sun. I think those two make a lot of sense. I talked about it in a video way back in February, but Mother does make a lot of sense to me. It's just weird that Nintendo doesn't want to localize Mother 3, even though it's highly requested. This has been the generation of Nintendo fulfilling these impossible ports, and Mother 3 is sort of at the top of everyone's list in that regard, considering it's literally a meme. It's a part of popular culture, the fact that Nintendo does not want to port this game and give it an English localization. So I just think it makes sense to have a big remake of it, whether it be HD 2D, 3D art style similar to Link's Awakening, something like that I think makes perfect sense for Mother, and that also would fulfill the requirements, quote-unquote, of Brazil's tease, because although he said a new entry in his wording, he did reiterate that he would consider a remake a new entry. And then he also said recently, at the same time when he said there was going to be a June Direct, that there's going to be a game announced at the Direct that surprises us in terms of it being cross-gen. A game that we think should just be a Switch 2 game, but for some reason is on the Switch 1 as well. And this is kind of a weird one to predict because I'm going to name a bunch of Nintendo games that we could see at this Direct in a second. Really, any of them could be cross-gen, theoretically, except when I get to those big games that could be teased for 2026. So I don't know. It's something to note, something to watch out for, but who knows what that could be. Let's actually get to some games that we could see revealed at this presentation, though. First off, we've got the usual suspects: Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD, Metroid Prime 2 and 3, Kirby Planet Robobot, and Fire Emblem 4 Remake. These are 4 games that have been discussed non-stop in terms of future Nintendo releases. Kirby Planet Robobot and Fire Emblem 4, I believe, were leaks from Nate the Hate. Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD has been a rumor since like 2017, and Prime 2 and 3 has been a rumor for a few years now as well. So I think it's more likely these games just don't exist and are never coming out, but it is worth mentioning because we've heard about them for so long, and Nate in particular was really adamant about that Kirby Planet Robobot rumor, so I would kind of be surprised if that doesn't exist, but also, why would we not have seen it in March? I don't know. I think we will see some Switch 1 games at this event, but who knows if it's going to be these 4. A game that I think might be the most likely Switch 1 game, Yoshi's Woolly World, which if you recall was accidentally teased in the American version of the Switch 2 Direct. There was just a little section of art from Yoshi's Woolly World in the presentation, and it seemed to be new art. Good Vibes Gaming did a great video on this where they compared it, and they figured out that it wasn't the Wii U art, it wasn't the 3DS art, it was new art. So whether that was just an expanded box art that we've never seen, or if it is a new box art, I think it is very suspicious that was even in the Direct. I'm not really sure how someone makes that mistake. There were reports that the employees who worked on the Direct were kind of in a time crunch in those 2 weeks when they had to do, the Switch 1 Direct in March, Switch 2 Direct in April. So maybe, honest mistake, people were rushing. Who knows? But it's just a very weird and specific mistake to put Woolly World there if it's not indeed coming to the Switch this fall. So I think that one does make a lot of sense to be revealed here. I think it's like a 50-50 chance if that was a real leak or if it was just a mistake, but I think it makes a lot of sense to be a Twilight release for the Switch. The NSO playtest took place in November and featured a completely new game with those weird little characters and footage that Nintendo will claim almost immediately if you put it in your video. I would imagine we're going to see this game eventually. It's kind of weird that we're going on a year and we haven't heard anything about it. Only a matter of time, I suppose. I would be pretty shocked if that was simply a test of the online system. I wasn't included in the trial or whatever, but from what I've heard and from what I've seen, sorry Nintendo, it looks pretty in-depth. It looks like an actual game, so we've got to see this at some point, right? So, gotta mention it in this section. I have Mario Kart World DLC written here. I know this is something people don't want to hear about, but the fact of the matter is we are going to get Mario Kart DLC at some point, right? They did it on the Switch, they did it on the Wii U. This game's gonna sell like bonkers. They want this game to last, I would imagine, the entire Switch 2's lifespan. At some point, there's gonna be DLC. I'm not saying we're gonna hear about it at this Direct, but I think if they wanted to gain some goodwill after giving Mario Kart World an $80 price tag, they could say, hey, we're going to release DLC in the future, and it's all going to be free. That, I think, would alleviate a lot of fears and a lot of concerns about that $80 price point if they commit to free updates only from here on out. I don't know. It's not super likely, but I think it could make sense. And again, that would gain a lot of goodwill and I think would actually drive copies of Mario Kart World. I think people would buy Mario Kart World or pre-order it, depending on when this Direct happens, if they hear that the DLC is free. So I don't know. Just a suggestion. I think it's more likely we just don't hear about it at this Direct, and maybe next year we hear about some Mario Kart World DLC, but worth noting. Also, I guess it's worth noting that we could see a Mario Kart World trailer at this Direct if it happens before the Switch 2 launches. That would be kind of weird, considering we've seen so much of this game, and I don't really think there's much new for them to reveal, but maybe we'll get another trailer and another look at Mario Kart World if it happens on the 3rd or the 4th or whatever. Another thing I talked about in that video I referenced earlier, Arc System Works had a leak, and 2 projects got leaked from it. Project Watari, which is apparently a game that runs on Unreal Engine 5. It's supposedly, people are thinking, a fighting game. Watari apparently means cross in Japanese. And then Project Life, which has a bit of Hotel Dusk vibes. It seems to be more of a shorter visual novel type of game. It is worth noting that Hotel Dusk apparently got a new trademark recently. I don't know if that means anything. Usually it doesn't, but it could, especially considering it's not just a renewed trademark, but rather an entirely new one. Again, those Project Life leaks, there were some images that came out. They looked pretty similar to Hotel Dusk's art style, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's what it is. Regardless, I think we could see it here, and Project Watari I think is almost a lock. In that leak, it said this game was supposed to come out in November of 2025. If that's the case, we'll almost certainly see it at this Direct, and I think it could be a big 2025 release for Nintendo. Speaking of trademarks, Magical Star Sign, the DS RPG, got a trademark as well, so I don't know, maybe that's happening. Switch 2 editions, I think, are an interesting discussion. The 2 that come to mind for me in terms of new Switch 2 editions we could get are Super Mario Bros. Wonder and Pikmin 4. These are 2 games that make a lot of sense for these Switch 2 editions. 2023 games that seemed like they should have gotten DLC, not because they were content dry, but because they made so much sense to get extra content. They never did. It would just make perfect sense for a Switch 2 edition. And if they are indeed getting Switch 2 editions, I would imagine they are announced here. It's also worth wondering if they'd announce the free updates at this Direct. It could make sense if the Direct happens before the Switch 2's launch, because they could say, hey, here are the updates that are coming out on release day, and then next month, here's a new wave of updates that you didn't know about. And they could do a similar thing if the Direct happens after. So maybe free updates in this Direct as well. Please give me some updates for Xenoblade, please. We'll probably see some sort of NSO update in this Direct. Could it finally be time for DK64 with Bonanza on the horizon? Could we get another new system? Probably not if this is a Direct that happens before the launch, because we're already getting GameCube in just a few days. But if this Direct happens after the launch, I could see them teasing something like DS or Wii for the fall. Though usually they like to do new system announcements for NSO in September when people's renewals are due. That could make more sense. It would be a lot of NSO in a very short period of time if they do GameCube in April, and then here we are in June, we're getting DS or Wii. So I don't know. I think something in terms of NSO on Switch 2 that we could see is some more GameCube drops. Maybe Sunshine or Strikers for the 40th anniversary of Mario. Maybe just some new games confirmed to be coming out after that initial group that we saw in the Switch 2 Direct. We'll probably see some sort of mention about GameCube NSO. Now, something I've mentioned a few times already, Mario's 40th anniversary. Will there be mention of it at this Direct? I'm questioning it. I'm not really favoring one side in terms of this debate. I think at some point we will get get some sort of Mario 40th anniversary thing, whether it be within a direct or its own direct. If you'll recall, in 2020, we got a 35th anniversary direct for Mario in September. It was its own thing. But in 2021, we got a 35th anniversary segment for Zelda in the June direct. So it's not unprecedented to have an anniversary segment in a direct. And it's very possible that we could get a 40th anniversary Mario segment in this June direct. If we do get that, something like Galaxy 2 or a 3D All-Stars 2 with Galaxy 2, 3D Land, etc. could make sense. Some sort of Mario Sports game would make a lot of sense. 3 years is a pretty big gap for Mario Sports, which is pretty consistent. Camelot hasn't made a game in 4 years. Could be time for them to make something like Tennis. And then Mario 40, Mario 35, but with 5 more players for the 40th anniversary, would be nice to see come back. Hopefully it would be not limited like it was last time. That was so lame. I can't believe we can't play that anymore. So stupid. Bring back Mario 35, make it Mario 40, let us play it forever. That'll be a nice announcement. Then we've got some teases for 2026 that Nintendo could make. Something from Monolith Soft could make a lot of sense for a 2026 tease, especially because this would probably be a graphical showcase for the Switch 2. Whatever Monolith Soft is cooking, you know it's going to look incredible on the new hardware. Splatoon 4 is a game that I keep coming back to that seems like it could be due for a new title in 2026. That would be a 4-year gap between 3 and 4. There was a 5-year gap between 2 and 3, so that would about make sense. Animal Crossing is another game that feels like it is due for a new entry. Who knows if it's 2026 or 2027. And then there's been some rumblings about a new Zelda game this year. I can't see that happening whatsoever, but I could see a tease for a Zelda game next year. And people are trying to will this Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask remake into existence. I don't think there's been an actual leak about that. I think people are just kind of wishful thinking there, but it'd be cool. And if it does exist, it could make sense to have at this June direct. And then another thing I talked about in my recent video, Luigi's Mansion 4 potentially coming this holiday. If there is a big holiday game, we will see it here. And I think the most likely candidate is Luigi's Mansion 4. If you want my reasons for why, again, check out that video I did a few days ago. I'm trying to make this video a little quicker. It's not really working. I'm 37 minutes deep into this recording on my phone, but I have a lot of reasons for it there. I do think it's possible, though. Right now, I'm leading on the side of no. I know a lot of people are pretty convinced we're getting Luigi's Mansion 4 this October. Look, I would love that. I think it's a little soon for a new game that big, but we'll see. Let's now run down some third-party announcements that we could see at this June direct. I'm going to go rapid fire here through some third parties. It seems pretty likely we're going to get a new Resident Evil announced at some point this June. Could it be 9? Could it be a remake of 0? Could it be Revelations 3? I don't know, but it could make sense to announce it at this direct. Dragon Quest XII is a game we haven't seen in years. Could this finally be the time we see it for realsies? We know Dragon Quest and Nintendo have a terrific relationship. Would make a lot of sense. Final Fantasy IX Remake is a game that was rumored to be one of the tentpole third-party releases alongside the Switch 2. That doesn't seem to be the case, but we know this is coming eventually. Will it come in this June direct? Perhaps. A new game in the Ace Attorney series could make a lot of sense. It feels like Capcom is just about ran out of remakes they can do for the Ace Attorney series. It's got to be about time for a new one. It would make a ton of sense to have it announced at this presentation. There were rumors going around a year or two ago that Konami was going to make a new Castlevania game alongside a few other titles like Silent Hill and Metal Gear Solid that we have seen get announced. Could Castlevania be the next one to get announced, and could it be at this direct? I think that makes a lot of sense. We'll see. Rayman 3 is a remake that has been rumored a lot. There's been rumors circulating recently that there's going to be a big 3D Rayman coming a few years down the line. So if that's true, it could make sense to remake 3 and kind of get people ready for a big Rayman in a few years. A remaster of the first Plants vs. Zombies got rated a few months back. I hope that is real because that sounds so awesome. It would make perfect sense at a Nintendo Direct. Let's see it. Live Alive 2 is a game that got a bit of rumoring a while back. I would love to see a sequel to Live Alive. That would be so darn cool, and it would be right at home at a Nintendo Direct. A few more here. Could we see some more Japan studio IPs? make the leap from PlayStation to Nintendo. The one that comes to mind is Gravity Rush. Ape Escape would make sense as well, though there was a rumor that Asobi was making Ape Escape for PlayStation, so if that's the case, I don't know if it would be on Nintendo. Regardless, I'd love to see some Japan Studio IPs come over, because I don't have a PlayStation. Speaking of, Astrobot on Switch 2, come on! Come on! Come on! If I keep saying it, I will eventually will it into existence, and I won't have to buy a PS5. So Astrobot, Switch 2 edition, let's do it. Professor Layton and the New World of Steam still just has a 2025 window. Very skeptical of that game coming out this year, but if it does, we will see it in this Direct. And then finally, you could name about 1,000 ports that might come to the Switch 2. With how powerful this console is, really any game's possible. Some I have listed here. Any Xbox game, make your pick. Indiana Jones, Doom, Flight Simulator, Forza, etc., etc., etc. Microsoft probably wants as many games on the Switch as possible. We will probably see a lot of them at this Direct. Nate, the hate on Twitter, who started all this craziness about Xbox going multi-plat, he nailed that on the head. He said we're going to start to see some of those Xbox ports on Nintendo soon. So June feels like about darn time to see some Xbox games on Switch 2. Baldur's Gate 3 is a port that's been mentioned a lot, would make perfect sense. There were some rumors around Red Dead Redemption 2 getting a Switch 2 edition, that would be awesome. And then there were some rumors around a GTA 4 remake. I don't really buy that, but if it were to happen, it would definitely come to Switch 2, and perhaps it would even be announced at the event alongside a GTA 5 port. Who knows? Well, those are all the games I think are potentials to be at this June Direct. That was a mouthful. Let me know in the comments below if I missed any, but now let's get to my predictions of what I think we will see at this June Direct. All right, I think we're going to open on Project Watari, and it's going to be Xenoblade Fighters. I don't think it's going to be Xenoblade Cross Fire Emblem, as cool as that would be. Feels like a little bit too much of a pipe dream, so I think we're just going to get Xenoblade Fighters, which would still be awesome. It's kind of pathetic, but ever since that leak happened and people were suggesting it could be Xenoblade Fighters, it's kind of all I've thought about. I'm honestly more hyped about the potential of that than like Mario Kart World. That game sounds so awesome. There's so many great Xenoblade characters that would be incredible to fight as in a 2D Arc System Works fighting game. I digress. Xenoblade Fighters opens the Direct. That's Project Watari, and it's coming November 6th. Just to run through the dates of some games that, again, I talked in more detail about in my previous video. Dragon Drive, I think, is going to be August 14th. Metroid Prime 4, I think, is going to be September 18th. Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, I think, is going to be October 9th. And then Kirby Air Riders, I think, is going to come December 4th, but I think it's going to get its own segment, and we're going to see Sakurai. Yes, our GOAT is going to return to tell us all about Kirby Air Riders, and he's going to announce that Pit is playable. I don't think this is going to turn into Smash, where we get all sorts of different characters from different series in Kirby Air Riders, but I think Sakurai is going to make one inclusion, and that's going to be his other baby boy, Pit, from Kid Icarus. And again, that's coming December 4th. I think we'll get a segment reiterating the Switch 2 editions coming this year, and then they'll announce two more, the ones I mentioned earlier. Pikmin 4, which is coming September 25th, and Mario Bros. Wonder, which is coming October 30th. I do think we're going to get that Yoshi's Woolly World port. It makes way too much sense. Obviously, it's going to come to Switch 1 and 2, and it's going to come on September 4th. Next prediction, I am ready for the Fell For It Again award, but I think we're getting Prime 2 and 3 remastered Shadow Dropped. Obviously, these are going to come to Switch 1 and 2, and then in 2 weeks after the Direct, we're going to get Metroid Prime Trilogy physically. They're not going to do a physical of 2 and 3. They're just going to say, forget it, we're going to put the whole trilogy together, Metroid Prime Trilogy, physical edition. And again, I think that's going to shadow drop, so whenever the Switch 2 Direct happens, it'll shadow drop digitally, and then 2 weeks later, we'll get that physically. We'll get a please take a look at this moment in the middle of the Direct, and it'll be Golden Sun 4. I'm predicting that that's the game Brazil is teasing in terms of a new entry in a beloved series, and I think that's why Camelot's been gone for so long, about 4 years at this point, since they've made a game. I think that's why. I've got that releasing October 23rd. So I don't think Luigi's Mansion 4 is coming in October. I think that's going to be the quote-unquote big October game. Now for some third parties. I think this one makes a lot of sense. We're going to get a trailer for Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D with a date, and then we're going to see Yuji Horii like we did in the June Direct last year, and he's going to show us our first look at Dragon Quest 12. It feels like about darn time to see Dragon Quest XII. People were predicting that perhaps it would be in a Dragon Quest event this month. I guess there's still time for that, but it seems like it's going to be announced somewhere else. The Nintendo Direct with the Switch 2 would be a perfect spot for it. I think we're going to see Plants vs. Zombies remastered. Can't wait for that one. And then I think we're going to get a Gravity Rush collection, and the internet is going to explode. And again, I'm not predicting Astrobot for Switch 2, but it'd be nice. Just saying. Sony, I think it would sell really well on the Switch 2. I'm just putting it out there. Just an idea. Just planting the seed. I'll let it grow. We'll see where it goes. But Astrobot Switch 2, think about it. I think we're going to get one more big DK Bonanza trailer. We're going to see the other Kongs like Diddy and Dixie and Funky. We're going to see Pauline in some form or factor. And then I think at the end they're going to tease the inclusion of King K. Rool, but not actually show us him in the game. We'll have to find out how he's involved ourselves. But they're going to tease that in some way the Kremlins are indeed back and King K. Rool is leading them. And then to close the Direct, the one more thing is going to be Splatoon 4. I think Splatoon 4 makes the most sense for a 2026 game. They probably want a new Splatoon out as soon as possible because it is a system seller, especially in Japan. It's a huge multiplayer game for them. It's one of their biggest IPs at this point. I mentioned Animal Crossing, but I think we're a little early. I think that's going to be 2027. Same thing with 3D Mario. I think Luigi's Mansion 4 does happen next year, but we don't hear about it until at least September. And I'm not really sure those 3D Zelda remakes are even a real thing, or if we're just kind of willing that into existence. Like me with Astrobot, I get it, but I'm not sure those actually are real or happening. I think Splatoon 4 makes the most sense. So they're going to close on that, and they'll just give us a 2026 date, nothing more, and that will end the Direct. I don't think we're going to see Pokemon Legends ZA. I do think it's coming this year. I just don't think we're going to get a trailer in this Direct. I think the Pokemon Company will do their own thing, and then I also don't think we'll see the Duskbloods. I think that's going to happen in September or February. Not about time in June, I don't think. But those are my predictions for the Switch Direct in June. Over here, you'll see all of them on a beautiful little graphic that you can pause and zoom into. It'll be there for a little while, don't worry. Because I know I went a little quick here because otherwise this would have been a 2-hour video. There's so much to discuss about Nintendo in terms of what they could announce at this June Direct that I wanted to make it a little quicker. But again, for a little bit of a summary, look right next to me. But that's enough of me. Tell me in the comments below, what do you think is going to be announced at the June Direct? Do you even think there's going to be a June Direct? Because at this point, we don't know. But I think it's pretty likely we're getting a June Direct at some point. Drop your predictions in the comments for a date, and also for what games you'd like to see and what games you think we're going to see at Nintendo's June presentation. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that big fat button. We're going to be doing a lot of gaming coverage in the next few weeks. Obviously, the Switch 2 is dropping. I want to get a video out predicting Xbox's presentation coming this June as well. I'm super excited for that. And plenty of other stuff is going to happen on the channel in the next few weeks as well. It's going to be a jam-packed summer, and you don't want to miss any of it. So sub to the channel, like the video, share this with a friend who's hyped for a future Nintendo Direct. And with all that said, I'll see you guys in the next one. Put Astrobot on the Switch 2, please!